I'm Wendy from Maddie's Fund. If you would like to put in the chat where you're from, the organization where you're, sorry, my little foster kitty is distracting me. This is Cher.
So
she is one of three. I have Cher, Dion, and Ty. And if you understand that reference, then we are friends. But anyway, so we will be starting shortly. Chaos over here. The presentation will be 20 minutes long, followed by Q&A. This will also be recorded, which will be on Maddie's Pet Forum. So if you miss it, or you want to come back, or you have additional thoughts, we will drop that in the chat and make sure you're signed up. And so you can continue the conversation there. And I believe we've done so many of these that I think that's it. I think we all know the gist of it. So Gina, over to you.
I always love looking at the chat because it's just too cool to see where everybody's from. Thank God for COVID, right? Or we wouldn't be doing these kinds of things and meeting people from all over the place. Today promises to be a healthy, vibrant conversation. Let me introduce our team. Before that, though, the gist of today is partnering with different businesses and organizations in our communities and doing that in order to expand our reach. And think outside of the normal, no disrespect to the PetSmarts and the Petcos, but think about the churches and the restaurants and the community centers, the barbershops, car dealerships, food banks, anything is on the table, everything. And today we have Luis Quintanilla he is the executive director of Humane Society of Harlingen in Texas. Before that, though, Luis was the director of operations at Palm Valley Animal Society in Texas. HSH started 2020, with a save rate of 49% and ended it with a 92% save rate. That is amazing. With pet food pantries, drive-through vaccine clinics, microchip clinics, before those important holidays like New Year's Eve, and support from their community, HSH is ensuring that pet safety remains accessible to everyone. And joining Luis is Shannon McKenzie, who is the founder of Underdog Rescue in Minneapolis. Shannon founded Underdog Rescue in 2000 with a mission to help animals who didn't have anyone advocating for them. And over the last 20 plus years, her organization has helped and rehomed well over 10,000 animals. Wow. But while no longer the acting director, Shannon remains in the role of executive director, and she now lives in rural Minnesota with her husband, 6 dogs, 3 ducks, and 15 chickens. Well, you got me beat. All right, so do we have a plan? Shannon, are you going first and then passing the torch? How are we doing?
Yeah, either way. Excellent. I can certainly go first.
Excellent, great, let's hear from you.
Okay, so I and reflecting on how different partnerships can expand our reach and have expanded our reach over the years, I took a little bit different spin on it. A couple of mottos that we've always had at Underdog Rescue are do what you can and go where you're needed. And so these are 3 areas that has played out over the years. The first involved Minneapolis Animal Control, and my start in the rescue world going way back to 1997 when I was a law student that recently moved here, back here from San Francisco, and I happened upon Minneapolis Animal Control, and from there went weekly to visit the animals and bring them treats. And one time I was there, I saw a woman loading her minivan with batch after batch of kittens and cat after cat and dog after dog. And I was completely perplexed and took it upon myself to ask her what she was doing. And she told me she was the head of a rescue that was foster based, and she was bringing these animals to their foster homes. And I had never heard anything of the sort in my life. So I started as a volunteer and did that weekly and still visited animal control. And it came to my attention that Minneapolis Animal Control at the time had a policy that anything they considered a bully breed, whether it be English Bulldog or Pit Bull or Bull Terrier, did not make it back out the front door unless its owner came for it, which rarely happened. So while in law school, I partnered with an attorney and sued the city of Minneapolis and got that policy abolished. And from 1999 to 2009, I and maybe one other rescue did our best to rescue all the bully breeds from the city of Minneapolis. So that's one way that we helped with that partnership. It changed the culture of Minneapolis animal control. And now today, their euthanasia rate is negligible compared to what it was then 20 years ago. And pit bulls are not only allowed to be released to rescue, they're on the adoption floor any day of the week. So the second area, which is a spinoff of working with Minneapolis Animal Control through Underdog Rescue, we developed a partnership with the different veterinary technical schools, the training schools, and working with one of the vets, she told me she was the USDA vet also for a local puppy mill, which I had never heard of a puppy mill. So I wanted to know more about that. So I spent my introduction in an 8-hour shift at a puppy mill, posing as her assistant and looking at the faces of over 1,000 frantic dogs that are desperate for attention and trapped there, with the goal of trying to convince them to give us any that they wanted to discard for whatever reason. We were able to rescue 3 that day. And that just shocked me and opened my eyes. I had no idea something like that, A, went on in this country, and B, was federally sanctioned as an industry. And from there, I learned of the world of puppy mill auctions. And this was 2009 and 2010 when the amazing voters in Missouri had passed Proposition B, which was the first and only real attempt to reform the puppy mill industry in Missouri. And the backdrop of me entering the world of puppy mill auctions were these breeders working to prepare for the passage of this proposition because they knew they were going to be in big trouble. So the first auctions I went to, dogs were a penny and a nickel and a dime. You could get any breed. You could buy a King Charles Cavalier for a quarter. You could walk out with 20 dogs and have spent $7. So my goal again was to develop partnerships. I was in their world. I did not want to benefit them in any way, but I wanted to do what I can and save what I could, which is a very hard thing to do. And when you know you have to limit yourself and not benefit them financially, but you're still looking at the same dog who knows that you're its only chance. And, you just do what you can. And I did that. And as a result of years of doing that, I've now developed relationships with some of the breeders that know some of these things are wrong, know puppy mill auctions are awful, know that some of these places that their dogs who they love in their own way end up are horrific. So as recently as just this last weekend, we were directly released over 40 dogs ages 4 months to 6 years from different breeders. And that is something that now happens routinely. Luckily, we don't attend the puppy mill auctions ourselves and haven't, I think, probably for a couple years now. But we have these relationships with the breeders where they feel safe to give these dogs to us directly. And then leading that to the third area where we went where we are needed is we have volunteers that their passion is driving to Texas, primarily long distance driving to save rescue dogs. And they saw an adorable little paralyzed dog named Shortcake at the Palm Valley Animal Shelter that was June of 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. And they drove down to get little Shortcake and 27 other animals and bring them back to Underdog Rescue in Minnesota. Since then, we've gone in August and gotten another 22 dogs in September and saved 46 and brought them to Minnesota in November 2020, where we took up 39. And then December 15th of 2020, we brought up 98 dogs and cats. And then as of 2021, we've that brings it to 233 that we took in 2020. In 2021, we went to Palm Valley in February and came back with 62 animals. And then in May, we branched out, developing a partnership with Harlingen, and brought back 56 animals between Palm Valley and Harlingen. And then the latest was just this last September 29th, where we came back with 41 dogs, half of which came from Harlingen. So in conclusion, our community partnerships have been an evolutionary force that enabled us as an organization to do what we can always and to go where we've been needed. And so we plan to continue that, and who knows where that will lead us next. But we continue to help in all of those areas as well. Minneapolis Animal Control, the breeder world, and the Texas shelters of Palm Valley and Harlingen.
Oh, Shannon, very, very impressive. Thank you so very much.
Yeah,
I love it. I love it when I learn something new, and I learned some things today about the puppy mill industry that I didn't know. I wish there were more people like you telling the real stories. So I'll hand it over to Luis, who is clearly a partner. I'm sure very appreciative of the work you do, Shannon. Luis, take it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that motto. Do what you can and go where you're needed. We were trying to figure out a plan to keep them here forever last time that they showed up, and get them back as fast as possible. So yeah, it's much needed here. I wish we could have an assembly line just nonstop. So yeah, the need is heavy down here. It's massive, and it's not something that a lot of people understand when they're not from a region like this. It's incredibly difficult. It's an incredibly gigantic challenge for the nearly 2 million people that live down here. There's maybe 20 to 23 vet clinics, and only 2 of them are low cost. It's crazy, with an excess of easily 60 to 70,000 stray animals out there on the street every single year. Yeah, it's a massive challenge. So I enjoy the operation sides of things. I love being at the shelter. That's my favorite thing. I think I just couldn't do anything else. I love operations. That's what I love. But as an executive director, we have to do all the stuff that is not so much fun immediately, right? It's not about the short range successes. It's all about long range. And so marketing is how you hit that hard, right? And I get approached so often, and increasingly so, from individuals and organizations throughout Harlingen, throughout the Rio Grande Valley, who want to help. And so often, at least at first, the one idea that they bring to the table, or the one idea that they think that they have to offer, right, is, oh, well, can I sponsor adoptions for like a week or two? And I said, well, no, we don't charge for adoptions. Why not? I said, well, because it's South Texas, and that's crazy. It's like charging for heat or something. Like, we have a lot of it, and we have too much of it. So, but there's all other kinds of ways you can help us out. And so, yeah, we've gotten incredible partnerships from places and from individuals that we never even thought of before. So last year, one of our biggest successes was through Giving Tuesday. We partnered up with a local attorney, a prominent attorney who is a massive animal lover. One of our marketing people saw that she had posted a picture of her cat on Facebook. She said, oh my God, she has billboards everywhere. Let's see if we can just talk to her, and she became our Giving Tuesday ambassador. So she has all these amazing connections in the community, thanks to her work and her other philanthropic, endeavors. So it fit perfectly, and we're able to triple our fundraising goal, or we achieved our goal and then tripled it. It was incredible, especially last year when all of our events had been canceled for obvious reasons. And all of that ambiguity had sort of made us not quite know how we were going to turn out the year. So that was a massive one. It didn't take anything. All it took was just us reaching out to this attorney randomly because we did some Facebook stalking, and we got almost $20,000 just from that one interaction. So that was huge. Another car dealerships. There's a lot of car dealerships down here that, want to take part in something. They want to do something. And I said, okay, you can definitely write a check. We're not going to say no to a check, but what about sponsoring a vaccination clinic? Not only is it great PR for you, it's great for us because it lowers our overhead, but we're also serving the community, which is much needed, because we know that there's a good chance that a lot of these animals may end up, for one reason or another, at our shelter, at another shelter, and at least they're going to be arrived with a bolstered immune system and microchipped and all that stuff. So there's so many ways to support that life-saving and that mission that go far beyond just your four walls of your shelter, and far beyond just sponsoring an adoption or two. So that's the really cool stuff that we get to see. And there are a lot of I guess businesses and individuals in the community where I'm not quite sure how we could possibly partner. I don't know. They call me or they email me and they say, oh, we'd like to do something with you. And I said, okay, great. And I immediately say yes. And then after I send that email, I think, well, what does that even mean? Like, how am I going to make this something that works for our organization? And so we had a construction company come out, a big construction company down here. And, they said, hey, I'm a big animal lover. I just want to take a tour because you guys have done some great work. I think RTF'd a cat to their neighborhood, so they were kind of aware of what we kind of do. And so they took a look at our lobby, and of course it's a dump. I mean, we keep the kennels clean, we keep the cages clean, but that's about it. Everywhere else is a garbage pile. So they said, well, your paint looks pretty nasty, and so does your flooring, and so does basically everything else. We can't tackle it all right now, but can we come in on a weekend and safely repaint everything? I said, yeah, sure. All we got to do is move the animals to a safer area to make sure that there's proper ventilation, all that stuff, and then we're good to go. Let's do it. And so it was great. Now we have a much nicer lobby, still gross, but much nicer than it was before. And it was just, who would have thought that this company would have been able to do that, right? But it's awesome. Now we get to take photos of adopters in there and fosters going home. It's pretty great. So I think what we found is that, last year when I first came into the shelter, I realized, okay, well, I have all these plans, right? I want to do all these things, and then COVID happened, so that threw everything out. Well, what can we do? We need to focus on somehow increasing adoptions and fostering, even though people can't even come into the shelter and we can't do any events. So we focused heavily on intake diversion and fostering, and that's what saved us, and that's what has sustained us ever since. And our approach to that was, the fundamental assumption that, or my fundamental belief that people are good. People are overwhelmingly good, and they want to do the right thing. They want to help. They may not know how. They may not know where to begin. And, as amateur experts that we all are in this industry, it's our job to be effective at communicating that and keeping up that communication through transparency and all of that, right? So enabling people to help. They shouldn't have to seek out ways of trying to help you, right? They should, you should make that pretty evident. Like if we ever have a volunteer that's just standing around at your organization, not quite knowing what to do, there's a problem. I'll take them. Give me your volunteers. Always be ready to receive that help, right? And so, that's kind of the approach that we've taken to these organizations and these partnerships, whether it's a rescue on the other side of the country, whether it's a car dealership, a hospital wanting to donate food, whatever it may be. It's, people want to help. We just have to figure out a way that they can fit, because everybody does have a place in this, and there's no way that we possibly could do it on our own. It's a massive movement, and none of us could get it off the ground by ourselves, right? So yeah, that's kind of our approach. And every single day we get more and more organizations coming forward trying to do something with us, and it's pretty awesome to see that there's so many people who want to get involved. And it's not only something that helps short term, right? Like obviously if you get more Facebook followers, if you get the word out at events and you get more donations, right, it's going to help your bottom line. It's going to help you pass that along to all these animals that need extra medical intervention, things like that. It's pretty helpful short term, but long term, kind of touching on what Shannon spoke about earlier, engaging with those politicians with maybe let's just say ugly legislation that may be on the book still, whether it's breed specific or things like that, stuff that you want to engage later, but you don't maybe have the political clout to do it now, or things like that, or you're just kind of biding your time waiting for your opportunity to make that permanent change for so many people and for so many animals. You take those pictures on Facebook with, hey, look at this prominent attorney, look at this great car dealership, look at this grocery store, look at this local business owner, look at this construction company, that's whatever, right? And it's kind of like, hey, all that translates into look at your constituents that I'm talking to and love our mission. Look at your constituents, right? So that later on, if there is something that you have to do, it's kind of a nice way to make them jump on board without having to do anything too aggressive. So it saves lives long-term and short-term. So yeah, that's what we do at the Humane Society of Harlingen. That's how we tell our story, and that's how we've been so successful. Right now, our save rate for the year is almost 94%. We were a little bit worried, and we have been worried for the last few months, really. There's been animals in the lobby and in the office, and I have 5 fosters in the spare bedroom right now. But we're getting through it, and our relationship with the city is great. So yeah, and with the community has been amazing. So that's what we do. That's how we do it.
Thank you, Luis. You said a lot of things that made me think of other things. The car dealerships, if those of you in the audience who have not approached your car dealerships, you really might want to rethink that. In Sacramento at Front Street, we developed a relationship with Toyota Elk Grove. They're all individually owned per se. And when they give you money, they can ask the corporate office to match. And every year we would get 20 grand out of Toyota. A lot of people don't know that. Going places where you're not expected to be is always the most fun. And maybe Luis or Shannon, either one of you, have you partnered with a business that most people would say they don't go together? That's why are we doing that? And the reason we do it is to expand our reach, right? More adopters, more volunteers, more donors. But what's kind of like the craziest place you've been, Luis?
Well, coming up, I think it's in late November. So my community engagement person got an email from a gynecologist's office wanting to do an adoption event. And she looked at me and said, what do we do? And I said, well, the answer is yes. We have to figure out a way to make this work. And I said, what about like public health? Because, animals being safer in our community, being microchipped and vaccinated and getting all of that out there, that's under the umbrella of like public health, right? So like, let's just talk about that. Let's spin it that way. Let's like, hey, we'll go from there. It's like, I don't know of any organization that we can't find a way to spin a relationship with. We all have that common ground. It's as nonpartisan an issue as it gets, saving cats and dogs. Like, who's going to say no? Like, it's just, so it's up to us to find that creative way of saying, okay, I know this looks weird, or I know this may sound weird, but we can figure this out. And so that's coming up in late November. So we'll see how we do.
Thanks, Luis. Shannon, do you have anything to add to that question?
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind. We do annually an adoption event with BMW. So that's one dealership that we work with, and that always goes well, and they give a donation on top of it, and it's a fun day. And another good venue that we, stopped using during the pandemic, but we used to have adoption events in pet-friendly apartment buildings, like in their lobbies. So people that live in the apartments can just go down and look at the adoption event and that type of thing. And that was always beneficial as well.
Perfect. There was a comment in it's moving too fast for me, from Mary Lou in the chat about not having a whole lot of luck with dealerships. And she's asked that if any of you who are having that luck, if you could email her. It's also in the chat, her email. But if you want to put it on the forum, Maddie's Pet Forum, we can all read it at the same time. I'm sure there's some really good ideas out there. I'm very curious to hear from Melina in Vegas. She says they've partnered with some very interesting businesses, and my head is going to all those like little chapels, things like strip clubs, Hooters for Neuters. Melina, please put something in the chat to give us an idea of how sorted you've gotten. I know in Sacramento, we were approached by one of the best marijuana collectives in town, best in that they ran their business well, according to the city. And we did an event on 420 with them and raised awareness for adoptions. And, what we found was there were a lot of little old ladies going in there buying weed. We didn't get too much pushback from our community. Something else that you said, I think it was you, Luis, that most people are good. Most people are good at right, or they wouldn't stay in the lines on the freeway and they wouldn't stop at the red lights. And I think sometimes what holds us back is us. right? And it takes work to do these events with businesses, but we can't afford not to, because you never know if that's going to be your heiress who adopts your organization in a financial way or an influential way, like your local attorney.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, it's just all about that openness, and every single obstacle that we've faced. I mean, okay, yeah, there's some internal policies and practices that needed to be thrown out for sure, but the biggest thing was that workplace culture, and that's what really can either make or break an organization. And that's everything. So if you're not open to people, not open to that help, and you're screaming at the community that you're supposed to serve, like, no wonder you're not successful, right? That's no wonder your animals are not in good condition. That's why it's happening. When you don't resonate with that community, and why aren't you? It's because you're not open. And so we had to deal with that. I think feel like most shelters that are great now, at some point were controlled by that old mentality of like, no people are good enough, no adopter is good enough, no foster is safe enough, whatever. Meanwhile, animals are dying by the minute. And that's really what it's all about, is just opening that mind. I mean, there's so many people, so many examples. Just the other day, like, okay, obviously we have partners that are really prominent in the community that fit the mold of what most people think are like, oh, acceptable, right? Like our attorney partner, right? But then we also have like the guy who's like tatted up all over his face, who comes in and adopted the one dog that was like on a deadline, who needed that special care, but he had the patience and the time to take on that challenging dog, and he's been safe in that home for like 3 months. So it's like, but I have a hang up, so I'm going to let this dog die. I mean, that's just monstrous. So yeah, that's everything.
There's some really good examples in the chat about partnering with Kiwanis, local breweries, having contests between breweries, bars. Bars love making a signature drink named after dogs and cats, and competing that way. Having pub crawls now that we're allowed to go out and drink. Hopefully the lessening of the pandemic will allow us to be more visible, physically visible in our communities. Dar on the chat, though, said she's run into some roadblocks because larger organizations have already partnered with some of the dealerships, and it's hard for a small rescue to get in there. So I have a thought on that. It's partner with the large organization. Are you pulling from that? Are you a good partner to them? Do you have a relationship with them? And just ask, can we be part of this? And I think a really good, solid shelter would say yes and share the wealth with you. If you don't ask, the answer is always no, in my opinion. Shannon or Luis, do you have any thoughts on that, on how smaller groups can gain some traction or garner some influence?
Tap into your adopters and tap into your volunteers, because that's a really good, you never know who works where, who can help open the door for you. And Luis brought to mind one of our funnest events we do as at a tattoo parlor. We do adoption events. So just be creative and tap into the resources that you have at your disposal that you might not be thinking about.
There was a comment from Sharon, Luis, in the chat about how you connected with pizza parlors who distributed flyers for you on every pizza box.
Definitely.
Talk about cheap and easy.
Yeah, and it helps everybody, right? Like, clearly it helps our animals get more exposure, and it helps that business, garner even more support than they already had in the community, right? So yeah, it was not just on pizza boxes, but it was like on to-go bags for like 20 different restaurants down here in 3 of the 4 counties in the Rio Grande Valley. We spread them out everywhere. And so it only cost us what it cost to print out. And even if the animal, one of the concerns from one of the staff members, like, oh, but what if the animal is adopted before this, this order of sushi goes out? And so, what does it matter? Get them to the shelter and they'll throw another cat at them. It's fine. It was great. So it worked out quite a bit, especially when everybody was, was stuck at home and couldn't go out and dine out. So it was great. That was a big one.
Super smart too. Super easy. Dar also asked if any of you have a pitch that you use when you're going to a business, if you could also share that on the forum, that would be super, super nice and helpful. You know, something that I keep thinking about as we're talking is, are we capitalizing enough on our volunteers? I can only reflect back in Sacramento, but we would have weekends where we would have 6 events. I mean, we would go to a grand opening of a beauty parlor. I mean, really crazy, unusual places. We did not have enough staff to do that. They were all 100% volunteer managed. And you recruit that type of volunteer that has those people skills, that is a good champion ambassador for your work, and you tell them what you want them to say, and they will say it. You know, volunteers are super smart too, sometimes a lot smarter than we are. I know that we had several in Sacramento that were doctors, lawyers, bankers. We don't know about people's skills until we get to know them and ask them. So Shannon, you're an entirely volunteer-based organization, or no? You're on mute.
Sorry, we have a small staff of just 4 or 5 people, but the rest is volunteer, with a core of hundreds of volunteers.
And you wouldn't be able to function without them.
Oh no, absolutely not.
And Palm Valley and Luis's organization and the animals would not benefit from your work if it were not for just regular people helping it.
Right.
So this is, I guess, rhetorical to the people in the audience, but are you really trusting your volunteers to help you? And if you are, hallelujah, Jesus. And if you're not, you need to ask yourself, you know, what are we afraid of? And my motto is kind of, if nobody dies, we're golden, right? We can fix anything. Let me look at this.
I think a big part of like people's hesitancy to utilize their volunteers, I think it all begins like at the top. Like it begins with your leadership, with your staff and everything. Like right now, if any of the news outlets down here wanted an interview, I feel comfortable with any one of my staff taking that interview. Like it's because they all know the mission inside out. They can sell it. They know how to speak it. They know how to, they live it and breathe it every day. But when there are gaps in that buy-in, then it's going to ripple out to volunteers and to fosters, and there's all this muddiness about not quite sure what we're doing or why it is that we do the things we do. So, if you can get that buy-in and you have that, that really solid team and that workplace culture, it's going to ripple out from there. And this last weekend we had one of our vaccine clinics that we do it every month. It's a drive-through clinic, and we saw about 320 cats and dogs in a span of about 2.5 hours. And we use like 11 volunteers for that. We only have a staff of 10, and that day I think we only had 6 of us on site. So yeah, I mean, and we didn't have to, it was so autopilot. It was great. It makes life so much easier when all of your staff knows what to say and what to do and where to go. So yeah, the volunteers just jump right in.
So one of the big goals of this challenge is reaching areas of our communities that we haven't typically spent much time in. Luis or Shannon, are you doing that? How are you doing that? Is it strategic? Is it how is your effort going towards making sure that you're touching all those communities, not just the ones that need the most help or the ones that have the most money?
Sure. In South Texas, I mean, there are a lot of areas that are incredibly underserved, right? Under-resourced. And all 4 counties in Texas are in the top 10 poorest counties within the state. So there is a lot of need. And, I touched on briefly on the stats, earlier. We just are, we're facing quite a bit of challenges down here. So what we do is I made sure to hire a director of community engagement who was bilingual and who had that perspective and who was able to really communicate that effectively, because I'm bilingual-ish. I can get through a conversation with a customer about an adoption or a foster, something like that. But anything beyond that, it's not quite going to happen. So what we do is we make sure to go out into those rural areas, just outside of Harlingen, and really talk to people. Our staff are, mostly from those areas. Mostly they grew up there, and now they get to go back to the same places where they grew up and make an impact for the animals that they love. So I think it's just having staff and a mindset that's experienced that's lived there, that's been there, and that sees it every day and wants to make that difference. It really lights a fire under people.
And for our part, like I said before, initially our mission was Minneapolis Animal Control and the animals there. And now that they've moved to a place where you can hardly recognize it today versus what it was 20 years ago, we're able to move to places like South Texas and help there where they need us. When I living in Minnesota, I grew up in Ohio and the Bay Area in San Francisco. There's nowhere like Minnesota. I mean, not to brag, but the culture here in regards to animals it's not like anywhere in the country. I mean, it's hard to describe, but when I tell a friend of mine from high school who was the head of fundraising for a Bay Area shelter what life is like here to adopt out animals, and how for every animal we have 10 applicants and we can pick from the 10 that best fits this animal, where she can't find homes that will take a dog for free, which, as Luis's experience as well. It's just a different culture here, and we're going to use that to the animals' advantage that are in other parts of this country and work with the shelters that need us. And so that's where our focus is going to be. And in regards with the puppy mill industry, like I said, that has changed a lot over the last 10 years. And the dogs there's so many more rescues that know about puppy mills, so many breed specific rescues that are unfortunately willing to spend quite a bit of money saving the animals, that we're able to more step away and focus on dogs given to us directly and do different things like go down to Texas and help out where we're needed there.
Very good. There was a comment thanking you, Luis, for bringing up language and bilingualism. And it isn't just about speaking the language, but it's about not just understanding, but appreciating the cultural differences. And we don't know everything, but we do know that regardless of what country you're from or what language you speak, people's love for animals doesn't change, right? It doesn't.
Yeah, I think it transcends everything. That's why a bunch of random partners are all, clamoring to, figure out a way to help, right? What does a construction company have to do with a gynecologist, right? Or a car dealership with, a grocery store, but everybody wants to help. It's a really uniting and wonderful thing. I think that's why we keep coming back to it, right? I mean, I'm not scrubbing kennels anymore, but I did for a long time. And there's a reason why we all came back to it every single day, getting paid nothing and often getting treated poorly. It's because we had enough of those interactions and that true belief that this is something that people want and this is something that's good and that's what we're going to do. And I think that more than anything, regardless of what size your organization is, whether you're a gigantic intake facility or you're a small rescue, whatever it may be, if you believe that and if you believe in that mission, if your staff does and your volunteers do, then people are going to hear what you have to say. But if you don't believe it, no one's going to believe you. That's all there is to it.
Yeah. And I think too, it's knowing the community that you live in, because some of us are rural, some of us are really urban, and where people go and what people do can vary greatly. And I think about Oak Park in Sacramento, which is often considered, it's very gentrified now, but it was often considered as high crime, low income. But I'll tell you, that corner barbershop is where you go to meet people that are influential in that community. But if you don't get to know that community and know where people shop, that corner store where the kids go get their soda or their candy, if you overlook those things, I think we miss big opportunities. That church where everybody goes, finding those locations that are trusted that's what's going to open doors for us. And we can have, it's not that hard. It just takes a knock on the door and an introduction. And I think we'd be pleasantly surprised at how many opportunities, more opportunities we would have if we spent that time. And our volunteers can do that too. And they probably perhaps even live in those communities, but we don't know until we ask. So a lot of chatter about Halloween candy in the chat and capitalizing on Halloween and interweaving it with our animal sheltering. Any thoughts on that, Shannon or Luis? using holidays, special events.
Yeah, I've seen that on Facebook too, that attaching a little blurb to Halloween candy. I mean, yeah, anything like that is great.
Yeah, I mean, and for our world, right? I mean, no matter how many thousands of times it's being done and been done, having people show up for a costume contest for their pets is going to get 1,000 hits immediately. I mean, that's the easiest win right there. You want more engagement this week? Just put out a post that says, "Hey, show us your pictures of your babies in costumes," and forget it. People are going to go nuts. Everybody, no one's immune to that. It's adorable.
Absolutely. I had a thought that came into my head and then it kind of fell out, but it's coming back to me. I think we talked a little bit about those elected officials or influencing the people with the purse strings. Think about the economic engine that animals are in this country, right? Americans spent what, $103 billion during the pandemic on animals. So knowing your numbers in your community and the value, the monetary value that pet ownership brings to the coffers, while we may not like to think of it that way, it's important to know and understand and be able to speak to that. Because if there are people in high places that aren't necessarily animal lovers, but they're money lovers, that's an important conversation to be able to speak to. And I know it kind of went off the path there, but I always like to say what I think out loud. And yeah, people do love to talk about their animals. There's, chatter in the chat. Oh, that's funny, about Easter egg hunts. Put information in the eggs about adoptable animals. All we have to do is just vomit the ideas, right? Even if it's as crazy as it sounds, throw it out there, and I bet you we could bring it to fruition. Let's see, did I miss anything? Is there any question that I missed in the chat? And a beautiful thing about this business is we can plagiarize off of each other, right? It's the only place you can actually plagiarize legally and not get kicked out of college. Steal ideas, think about those shelters. And I'm proud to say in Sacramento at Front Street, we were incredibly creative. So think of that shelter. Is it Kansas City Pet Project? Maybe they're doing something wild and zany. You can do it in your town too. So, and a volunteer could spend time scouring the Facebooks of other shelters. You don't have to pay them to do it. And yeah, stealing is good in this business. Sharon says it's not really stealing, it's sharing and lifting each other towards the same goal. True that. There is a question, Luis, does HSH partner with rescues out of state? And if so, what does that look like?
Yes,
not necessarily, well, go ahead.
Sure, yeah, so yes, the answer is yes, we do. We have partners in all over the country. The challenge is getting them here, right? And part of our job, right, as leaders of shelters is trying to figure out how to maximize the impact of every single dollar on life saving. Because sure, I could have my one vehicle that I have go all the way to Washington with 5 cats in it, but why? When I could just get them adopted here for far less cost. Or if we only have one vehicle, what about all the RTF kits that we have in our shelter that have to be returned, right? Like, there's so many considerations that every single move that we have to make is part of, right? So we do partner with organizations all the time, but I wish there were 1,000 underdogs that could come down, and even still we'd need more. So that's the challenge. It's logistical challenges, and that's the only reason why. We just had a very big medical case come into our doors a couple of weeks ago, and there was a rescue in Pennsylvania, that wanted to take this dog off our hands. And but we just need transport. I said, well, you might as well be on the moon. It's not going to happen, because I can't take my one staff member for 4 days in our one vehicle all the way round trip, assuming this dog is even stable enough to make that journey. Meanwhile, we could have adopted, that same driver would have adopted out 40 or 50 animals in his time here, right? So those are the challenges that we wish we could overcome with a snap of a finger. But I think that kind of speaks more to northern shelters and maybe northern rescues, to really kind of maybe look at themselves and say, hey, look, have we eliminated all these barriers? Have we eliminated all these unnecessary barriers to life saving, and are we helping that national animal flow? Because that's the main thing. When I was the director of ops at Palm Valley, that was my main obsession. How are we moving, and why aren't we moving in certain ways? Because I know that if animals are arriving right now, there are animals that arrived a month ago. Have they been seen? Have I done all of my work to make sure that animal has been seen? And it's the same thing in Harlingen now, which is on a smaller scale and with only one location, right? So it's that same thing. But if you look at that zoomed out throughout the entire country, if there's a shelter in a northern state that has nowhere near the stray population of even just my city, why are they taking so damn long to adopt out animals? Why? I don't understand. When right now, I'm trying to literally give away animals with an entire year's worth of vaccines and medications for free, with the free spay neuter surgery, doing everything I can. Are you doing everything you can? Because indirectly, you're responsible for clogging the flow and making it so that people like me have to make those tough decisions. Likely, we haven't had to make those decisions in a couple of years, but that's never too far away. That's a scary reality. That's never too far away. It's always kind of there on the horizon. And so that's really what I think people need to look at. We are all connected. We are all connected in one way or another. And so if you're a barrier at your shelter or at your rescue or whatever organization it may be, I promise you're negatively affecting the rest of the country too. Not just your community. So that's something that I feel like that perspective needs to always be important. That's what I try to live by when I go to work.
Luis, thank you for speaking that truth. Sometimes it's hard to say those things out loud, but we definitely need to talk about them. Absolutely true. Wendy, are we out of time? I don't remember what time we end.
We are. So if anyone has any other questions, head on over to the forum and we can help each other out and answer questions or anything like that. And then join us on Thursday where we'll be talking about starting a welcoming culture, a more welcoming culture.
Shannon and Luis, thank you very much. Thanks to everybody in the audience. It's always nice to see you all sharing ideas. Let's continue this conversation on the forum, and we need to keep that thing going so more people can benefit from all of the brilliance that you have tucked away. Have a beautiful day. We'll see you Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.